sails. That's it, perfect. No, you're set to go on course. You got 20 minutes on low sails, then we can talk to you see?
Welcome to your weekly program, بالأحضان. A show with an accent for those without one. So, the news from Palestine is usually glam and the context of violence and struggle and war between the Palestinians and the Israelis. But we have today a very interesting story coming from a Palestinian American. Then he took himself to sail around the world under the Palestinian flag and to raise awareness of those people over there. And since nobody tells the Palestinian story, especially in the United States, here is a great story about the Palestinian. Almost a year to prepare himself for this journey and went for a trip. We're gonna hear the story of the young man and the sea. Welcome, بالأحضان and Nabil.
Thank you.
Very
Thanks for having me on.
sweet story, and I still blame myself. How did I miss that one from the beginning?
You would be amazed at how many did miss it from the beginning.
So,
I found it to be a very difficult thing to get traction for people to even believe, what was underfoot, with the Golden Globe race and the history behind that, and 50 years since the last one, and it was a showcase for countries that were fond of the sea and had strong seamanship skills, and and I thought, well, why the Palestinians have nothing to cheer for? Why don't we give them something to cheer for?
They're not even allowed to.
Well, and I asked first before I signed up for this. I called the Gaza head of Gaza Sail and Surf Federation. Mahfouz Kabriti, and said, why don't you have a Palestinian sailor? One of your, a better sailor will always be the younger sailor that had long experience. Who am I, a 30-year-old, first started sailing on Lake Calhoun at 30. I'm a late bloomer, if you will. And it's not saltwater. But I thought there's no reason, looking at all the different parts of a challenge like this, why we couldn't compete and win. I was a firm believer that was fully possible, and I thought it would be a great thing to showcase, my two halves, which are, I'm born Palestinian to two Palestinian parents, and in the United States. But listen to my accent. I've lived here, right in Chaska or Minneapolis, for the majority of my life. And I think that the Palestinians and the Americans, they have more in common than they either one thinks. And have a foot in each side, I can say that with confidence.
Well, also it presents, some kind of problem, some issue for you as you're making your decision throughout. So before you get into this race originated with is international competition.
Yes.
And the country one country originated this, the Golden Globe.
It was done once before, 50 years before this. So this was the 50th.
Why it took so long to take another one?
There was a lot of trial and intrigue with the first one, and so it was never done to those rules or called that again. But it was the grandfather of all of these other, BOC races or Vendée Globe. I mean, it really was the original.
Tell us about your relationship with water, with relationship with the sea, your relationship. Probably started here. We have 10,000 lakes.
We have 10,000 lakes and boundary waters, canoeing or water skiing, and living the pontoon life, even and fishing. We have all that in spades, and for bigger water, we have Lake Superior, and the beauty that goes with it too. But my experience with water was limited, other than having friends with boats that we would go out on, and sailing even less so. I didn't really get acquainted with sailing until my 30s in earnest.
So how is it different now? You are getting to the serious business of sailing in the salt sea, ocean. I mean, the idea of ocean is really intimidating for anybody even to fly over it, let alone sail through it. So tell us, how did it begin? You know, how you were made aware of it?
There was so much literature from the first race.
Yeah.
And I should probably preface this with, you know, as a late teenager, you know, early 20s, I discovered this genre of literature, the sea literature out there, written by sailors who knew that they were such prolific writers. And I devoured one book and then I couldn't stop myself, you know. Each one of these sailors that writes a book somehow references other authors, like they read something in some other book about another sailor's experience. And so they name each other, and it made it very easy to go and gobble up all of this literature. And then, you know, many years passed after I took care of that fix. And then I saw this race advertised, and I thought to myself, gosh, this would make me a liar. You know, when I was a kid reading those, I used to say, like, oh, it's a good thing I wasn't alive then. They would have had to deal with, you know, with me, you know.
You always learn to stay away from the water.
You know, even when I lived in Palestine for those 2 years, from the top of our house, you could see the glimmer of the Mediterranean. But, you know, of course, it's very difficult to get there from where we were. But so, you know, it'd be hard to say that we weren't people of the sea.
Yeah, well,
you know, I mean, let's be honest with you.
Our history,
maybe the seascape has shrunken somewhat, but you know, same thing.
Well, the Arabs, you know, start the fleet,
the commerce, and, you know,
and
it's not just the Mediterranean too. You know, all of the Indian Ocean. And then people to say like, oh, but this race has celestial navigation. You know, well,
what does it even that means?
You know, it was a fun thing to learn, is what it means. It makes you look at the sky in a whole different way, and it was, I think, for, you know,
so you
a
follow
boy's
the
mind.
Stars and
yeah, you measure the angle of the sun over the horizon, and
well,
then you do some calculations after you measure this.
Your ancestors have invented this.
They, you know, now we use a sextant, but they invented the astrolabe, which was the precursor.
And you do it without your smartphone.
You do without your smartphone or a calculator.
I think that was my biggest challenge. How do you live without smartphone for, you know, so there is supposed to be...
It was the most refreshing thing ever. After the first few days, there's a weird adjustment, and then...
You're free.
You are free, and especially on a sailboat, there's no more, you'll never find a more free.
There's notification every 2 seconds?
There's
notification?
No, yeah,
message, text,
peace and quiet. The notification I'm hoping for is the clicking from my fishing rod I'm hanging off the back of the boat.
So we understand that, I know that I cannot make the analogy, the old man and the sea, you know, now that relationship between this man and this fish and the sea. Yours was, what did you learn about yourself and the sea and all of this? You've been with yourself. How long, I mean, I know you didn't finish
you know, I was probably on, you know, the boat for a good 20 days. You know, I've been on a small sailboat for longer than that, you know, but yeah, but you get, you know how it's going to be, you know, after the first couple of weeks, really.
Take us through one day, one of your day.
You know, people think like you should have all this time to do stuff, but if you're doing it right, there's a lot of things to do. Firstly, your sleep is broken up. Maybe some hours in the daytime, some hours at nighttime. For whatever reason, the boat always seems to need your attention at nighttime. So, you know, Murphy's Law. But there is, you know, you wake up, you have to fix yourself breakfast or your coffee. All of these things take more time on board on a moving boat. You know, you're hanging on, you're cooking with one. Well, maybe 6 or 7 miles an hour.
Okay.
But it's all about the seascape. You know, how big is the sea? How lumpy is it? You know, and that's.
You're not making a headways or 6 hours.
Oh, you would be amazed. You know, 6 miles an hour for 24 hours. You know, now you have 140 miles. It's you know, you made it all the way to Duluth. You know, that's just.
And you have 9 months to finish that. Around the trip. Tell us, and so you know. Basically, you spend all this money to try to navigate and you know, survive. You know, you need to survive. So, what are the dangers? What are you facing there beside the water?
The dangers are probably fatigue that can creep in slowly and wear you down if you are not sleeping right, you know, or you're not taking your time. It is an easy thing to think that I can't sleep right now. I can't, you know, but you have to sleep. And, you know, I know I heard one of the other competitors say it's like curling up in the back seat of your car at 55 miles an hour. You know, it's very hard to do, and it's a good description. But once you get your hands around it and you realize you need it, you're not going to stay awake for 9 months. So the sleep was not, also, out of, sleep was never my hard point. I can sleep anywhere, on a hard floor, whatever, and I can fall asleep as quickly as I want to. So this is, a trick, I guess.
Exactly. Well, we all have those. Those Arabs have those tricks, and natural, comes natural. But that strong conviction that he has that I'm going to go and do. How many people were in this race? 19
started, I believe.
They represent different countries?
Right, yeah, from all over the place. New Zealand, Australia, England, Ireland, Norway, Russia, Estonian, Finnish, people that you would expect to be in that race.
Was that taking place during the World Cup?
It was.
So here is the World Cup playing soccer.
A lot of competition there, huh? And they even had it at the marina on a big screen TV so we could watch, watch the games, right?
So but that's probably I didn't hear about it.
Right, probably.
I watched 64 games and within 1 month. So you have this 1920 country representing you decided to represent Palestine.
Yes, I did.
Your heritage.
Well, yes, and there was already an American flag or two that was to be in the race, and so I thought, these people were very warm and hospitable when I lived there and visited, and they gave me everything, even though they had nothing to give, and to see how we're always portrayed in the general mainstream media, it's only time you are mentioned is for a negative, and I thought sport unifies everybody. Everybody loves sport, right? Especially coming from the Midwest. What are you raised from a young age to hold dear sportsmanship and fair play. And to find out that the Palestinians, they'd love to send one of their crack sailors from Gaza, but they are not allowed to get to the Olympics or anything. Not because the Olympics or Golden Globe doesn't let them in, but because they aren't given visas to travel to compete. And that's just that's a horrible shame. You can't abide by this. It's untenable. And so something has to be done. And if hopefully this will call some attention to it. If you don't know what the results of any race would be if not everybody gets to play that wants to compete, that's, you don't know.
When the rules are set, apply to everybody.
Absolutely.
We can excel. But you named your boat Liberty, which is USS.
Yeah, the USS Liberty. I mean, this is it's a dark spot in our history, but yet at the same time we're my American side. We're proud of our military. And the armed forces. And here is the most highly decorated ship in the U.S. Navy's ever history. And no one ever heard about it. Nobody knows anything about it. And before these guys are older now, so before they pass on, I thought they've been given nothing, and so I'll try to raise some awareness to that. And it was something that I always held dear. My father was in the Navy, lieutenant commander in the Navy around those same years.
67. We talk about the 6 days war, and it was. Torpedoed by the Israelis.
They tried to sink it, with all hands. They wanted to blame it on Egypt, and they really wanted it to sink without a trace so they could make their own story and craft it. And but those good boys, though, they didn't let it go down. They didn't give up the ship either, and got message out and saved themselves and their ship. It's a great story. They're the most highly decorated ship in our.
We don't hear about it. All we hear about the one who's bombing the Iraq and Afghanistan and all of this.
But they were great guys. They tried to make it out to the start of the race. They presented me with some books that they wrote. Some of the seamen of the ship. Here, and gave me the official USS Liberty hat and jacket. Which I wore proudly at the start. It was great.
Amazing. That's very. There is a story there because a Palestinian American going to Liberty, which was sunk very close to Palestine.
I don't think you can find an American that could empathize more with the Palestinians than the seamen of the Liberty, because they saw what we see every day. They got a little taste. This is.
They're not watching Fox News, huh?
Not anymore.
But the boat itself has to. You don't just take your boat. You just go there. So what's,
I mean,
how
I
you
had
prepare your boat?
freeze-dried 9 months worth of food at my house. I spent a year and a half doing that, making big dishes and freeze-drying it, and getting sailing gear here. My sails were made in St. Louis Park at Sail Crafters. Tim Carlson, big helper. Even the proprietor of the sail loft let me hang out on weekends and teach me skills. And he even made it to England for the race before the race, where all the competitors had a short
to qualify.
To qualify, and all to go from England to the start of the race in France. And we started 5 hours after the fleet. So last place, because we were still working on the boat. It's
Really?
Nature of not having a sponsor.
Always come
always
late.
late, always late. Yeah, it's true.
And there is something nice about being late. You've seen everything, and you can see everybody in the front.
Right, and then we did play a little Pac-Man, and we gobbled up some guys, and we finished sixth. So it was a promising short view of the future. What I was hoping.
I know that we always look at the bigger picture, the scheme of this wonderful trip. It was really competition against your doubts.
Against yourself. Oh, self-doubt is probably your biggest enemy. Self-doubt comes out at the very beginning of the race, when you're too wound up to sleep, and you're wondering if your navigation is going to work. It works great off of the dock, but now when I take my measurements on the water, on a boat that's moving, is this all going to work out? The food.
When nobody's around.
There were many questions, and self-doubt is probably the constant enemy, and you have to keep it at bay.
I know there is a sweet story that you told that you actually saved a bird.
Oh, right.
Tell us about that.
I saw, it was a beautiful day off of the coast of Portugal. I was headed, I had the El Norte, the north wind that comes out of the north. It was a great day, and I saw all these big white birds, doing just like in the nature channels where you see them plummeting into the water and going fishing. And I saw bonito and tuna jumping around, and dolphins. So I said, good enough time for me to go fishing.
Yeah.
I put out my line on my trolling line, and the dolphins, I swear, they were tell me something. They were jumping by the boat. And I looked back, and I got this big bird, and I had to reel it in fast because I didn't want him to drown. And he was big and ornery, the size of like a wild turkey that you'll see here in Minnesota, and big curved beak with, serrated teeth, and he was very angry with me, and I had to throw a blanket over his head and hold his head while I got the hooks out, and then he didn't want to leave, and he was very angry still, and I had to evict him. He wasn't playing nice,
Didn't pay the rent.
Didn't pay the rent, right.
You're supposed take 9 months, and you were ready for that. You have enough supply, and you only took, you said, 20 days or 19. What happened?
Well, I passed by the Canary Islands, and actually the race organizers came out to meet me in a little boat, and just to see how everything was going. And I was well rested, and I was feeling fresh, and I was really actually ready to go and try to, make a strong showing of it in this downwind portion that's coming up. But 12 hours into the downwind leg, where it was probably a strong 35, 40 mile an hour wind, but coming right from behind me. Same with the seas were also breaking behind me. It was exhilarating, but unfortunately it proved to be too much for my self-steering gear. Stainless steel pipe broke off in the middle of the night, and I tried for a good 10 hours to make repairs, and nothing was really holding and lasting. And so I knew I had a grim choice. Either you need to go to Cape Verde Islands, maybe another 1,000 miles away, but it's downwind.
You're not allowed to ask for help, are you?
No, but with this broken the way it was, I was going to have to get some repairs and maybe accept a penalty from the race organizers.
That's it.
But I decided on the Canary Islands, which was closer, but back into that strong wind. And
can I go back?
You probably shouldn't have gone back, but I did. I made it back to the islands. Unfortunately, it did destroy me.
More damage.
To myself at that point. 60 hours of no sleep, and steering. It was very physical, and it was rough weather, and no sleep for 60 hours makes a person start to.
How hard was
slip.
the decision?
You know, it was in
Because,
the beginning. I didn't want to make it.
The tagline of your boat is what?
Don't give up the ship.
Yeah.
You know, and I feel as though I kept to that. I didn't want to give up the race either, though. But
see.
I realized that what was broken is the one thing that it's critical. Nobody can get around without it, and you know, at least alone. You know, there was times after 40 hours of hand steering and being completely exhausted where I did probably fantasize about, you know, where's the eject button? Let's give up the ship. But I also knew that there was, you know, this was a solo race that you were to rely on your own wherewithal, and there would have been some, you know, I would have been upset with myself if I didn't use up all of me to get back without, you know,
no
requiring
second guessing
assistance.
there when you come back.
No, and it was decisive when I decided to turn around. It was, I knew this was going to be a 100% effort of multiple days to get back there. That was the hardest part of this whole race.
Exactly.
Was turning
Going
around.
back, huh?
Yeah, it was.
And I think to wrap this up, I think you said something even before you get into the race, when people will say, you know, where are you going to get the fund, where do you get the money? You said it is about how much the boat is. It's just about the boat itself, right? Something like, it's not the money, it's not how good the boat is, or it's just your relationship with the boat.
Yes, preparation. Preparation is probably 90% of it, and having a good boat. Everybody had, you know, a seaworthy, small, you know, family cruising boat, but they used to make them really stout in the 70s, and these were old designs. So there was no question there. You know, it's the preparation and the spare parts, and do you have a plan for every eventuality?
Making decisions.
And the decisions are that's on you. You know, I mean, it is only your life, so it's only fair that you are the one that makes that decision. And,
you still following the race?
Absolutely, absolutely.
What's going on there?
You know, there was one other guy with my same self-steering gear, the same make and model, and he was leading the race.
You're cheering for him, I'm sure.
You know, I liked him. Philippe was a great guy to hang out with, and you know, they were all great. I have a special relationship with all of them, to tell you the truth. You know, my favorite I thought was Mark Slats. You know, he's a Dutch guy, a big rower. He rowed across the Atlantic and smashed all these records. But for the reason that he is physically tenacious and not lazy. And at the same time, he's not a professional sailor like many of these other guys are. He will make up that, you know, whatever skill that there is a deficiency of, if there is any, he will make it up for just brute strength.
It's like this guy at the Jaws, you know, the guy.
Yeah, he's the courage.
Courage guy.
He is the courage.
Isn't
That's
it?
right.
Maybe I have a story there.
Yeah, he was, you know, a good buddy. Yeah. And
do you guys sail all the time?
Do we sail? Yeah, you know.
Day or night, or you just rest?
Yeah, no, there's no stopping at night. Yeah, it's
even when you sleep.
You become almost angry when the boat stops for whatever reason. If you're working on something, you are constantly
missing
thinking
something
about we need to make way. They say keep on making you know,
keep moving.
Progress. And when you end up stopping the boat, it's like lighting the fuse of a firecracker inside of you, where the frustrations build. And the eagerness to get started build, and your temper, you know, becomes shorter.
So now you are back, you know, had this wonderful experience, transformative. People go to Mecca, pilgrimage.
Right.
That was more transformative
experience.
So
well, you certainly got closer to God, you know, that's for sure. And you know, for people that like see, you know, mountainscapes and they find this beautiful and awe-inspiring, or going to the Boundary Waters and its beautiful lakes and hills and woods. I think that the seascape is just as beautiful as anything like that. You know, in its many moods, it's a beautiful thing to behold, and you feel so tiny and so fragile.
Look at this miles of water untouched.
White foam, untouched. You know, or a nice day, untouched. But you are the only one there enjoying it.
When I was in the military in Egypt, I used to sneak out early in the morning or late at dusk, and I look at this miles of sand. Untouched. I feel
not
God.
A footstep in there.
Nothing. I feel God just left.
Right.
You know, I'm the only one. I'm just the first one to come here. Well, Nabil, thank you so much for sharing this story. This is a wonderful story. We wish you well. I know this is not the end of it. You relax, take your time. You have 9 months.
Right. Yeah, we have some time.
Nabil Amra is a sailor that decided to take a trip around the world under the Palestinian flag, raise awareness of this, the blade of the Palestinian, that nobody is telling the Palestinian a story in this country. Here is one, and check him out, and we'll follow him. We'll see you next week. Assalamu alaikum, and God bless you all.
Thank you.